I now have the honor to present our ambassador, the Netherlands ambassador to Spain, Your Excellency, Mr. Kees van Rij.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jasper, for organizing this event. Orange is green. You don't have to be colorblind to see the word game in this, but it's a little bit deeper than just a word game. Actually, as you said, it's quite an ambitious statement, but it underlines very strongly the importance that my country, the Netherlands, attaches to corporate social responsibility, which has been part of our international ambition as a country and as a corporate world already for quite some time. Actually, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands even made a special corporate social responsibility passport. You cannot travel with it, but it contains a lot of very useful information. It's about people, planet, profit, about how to incorporate human rights with sustainability and ecologically responsible behavior and solid entrepreneurship, with a view for a long term, on a long term instead of a short term. And my embassy, of which the Netherlands Business Support Office is an active part, strongly promotes corporate social responsibility, and I'm very happy, together with the representative of Barcelona Activa, to open this talks, which bring together Spanish and Dutch stakeholders in this area. And the embassy with the Netherlands Business Support Office in Barcelona can, of course, provide information once the talks are over and the reality is there of every day doing business and finding out what to do, what best practices exist. We are there as representatives of the Dutch government to provide information on corporate social responsibility, but also to ensure and promote that if it happens as much as possible in a level playing field, which is, of course, absolutely crucial. And for that, it's a very active part of our foreign policy, and we are active in all kinds of international contexts, the OECD, European Union, and other international forums such as the UN to promote and underline it. It's an increasingly streamlined issue into our own Dutch corporate world, including in the small and medium-sized industries, or small and medium-sized enterprises. And I understand that up to 70–80% of Dutch companies, including small and medium-sized industries, they are somehow in some way involved in corporate social responsibility today. So Orange is Green should inspire us. It should help us to understand a little bit better what this is all about. And also, of course, it should help us to build a bridge in this specific area between the Netherlands and Spain. And as a Dutch ambassador in Spain, of course, it's my hope and my aim to foster these bonds, to make sure that Dutch, Spanish, Catalonian corporate actors and representatives of industry and authorities, that we can actually work together on this issue. And I hope that these talks will help to promote this type of exchange, and that we can all together in a united way make another step, maybe a small step, but an important, concrete step in the direction of a more socially responsible environment. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Rij. Excellent. We're immediately proceeding to the very first keynote speaker. I present to you Katinka van Cranenburgh. She's been a corporate social responsible employee and responsible for Heineken for very many years. But I'll leave it up to her to introduce herself and explain to you her credentials. Katinka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me over to explain or give some examples on a Dutch company, a Dutch beer brewer called Heineken, and to explain why orange is green. First of all, I'm not so sure if orange is green. And I would like to also share with you not the success stories, but clearly some more vulnerable challenges that companies have, because we all have them. And I think it is important to, whilst we celebrate the successes, show also the difficulties. But before I start, what is this talk about? Because many people speak about social responsibility or corporate responsibility, business in society, philanthropy, community investment. There's a lot. And I don't think we should go through all the definitions. On the left side, you see the commercial side. The more blue the circle is, the more commercial the side of the business. So this is what we call then the core business, going all the way up to the other side where you see the community. And if the community is at stake and the objective is mainly about the community, then we speak about philanthropy. And then in between that, there's a whole range of, let's say, types of terms that we all use. I think it's important to give some principles of what is corporate responsibility, or one of those other terms that you've seen. So we speak about accountability, about transparency, about ethical behavior, and then about respect for the stakeholder in general, but also respect of the rule of law, for international norms of behavior, and respect for human rights, as already mentioned. These are just some principles which state what are we actually talking about when we talk about business in society. And the core subjects, clearly, that we focus on is human rights, labor rights, or labor principles, maybe better indeed. The environment, of which later on you will hear some expert examples. Fair operations, consumer issues, and lastly, community involvement and development. These are, by the way, not on a certain sequence, but these are all types of issues that we think about and that we try to address when working in the field of corporate social responsibility. And I've been having the joy of doing that for Heineken for the last 16 years. And the last 6 years of that, I've been not only doing the work, let's say, with the feet in the mud, but clearly also reflecting on what we have been doing by being a teacher at ESADE and also researching as part of a research group at ESADE. But now, before we go to the theoretical side, some examples of the beer business I think are relevant. And I thought of two examples, and I will see if we have the time to do two, otherwise we can do one. First is a supply chain issue in Asia, and the second is a philanthropy issue in Africa. And why are these so important for Heineken? Well, if you look at the beer market in general, you can see where the growth is, right? So whilst in the northern part of Europe, northern part of the world, we are drinking less beer, you see in the southern part, the growth is very important. But maybe a more attractive slide to see, if you look at liters per capita consumption being drunk around the world, and this is a bit strange to visualize. If you're a beer drinker and you love beer, you should do it for now, but then don't do it again, because if you visualize that you drink around 52, 53 liters of beer per year, that might be a strange thinking. But you can see also here on the northern part of the globe, the liters per capita consumption is way higher than in Africa, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. So it's no need for rocket science to understand that all big beer companies in the world focus on these specific continents. And Heineken has been doing so already for a very long time. It has exported its first beer to Africa already in 1900. Its first local operation was actually in the city of Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1923. And from that onwards, local breweries have either been acquired or built, right? And still, Well, the last was in South Africa near Johannesburg in 2011. And you should visualize also, this is not about the Heineken brand necessarily, but this is all about regional brands, right? So when we look at sustainability at Heineken, we try to integrate it throughout the whole value chain. So whether it concerns water or CO2 or local sourcing of ingredients, responsible consumption, we look at where is it relevant within the whole value chain, and then on each and every aspect, the local department manager, so not a special CSR manager, is responsible for integrating this topic in the business. And also it is very important regarding our ways of working. So we try to work in a way where we say, well, we try to adapt to local values and behaviors, but we also try to, participate with our values and see if we can integrate them. And as an example of this, and this is a business perspective, right? But it will come later on also in the understanding of, well, how does that relate to society and how you as a company relate to your society where you're into. So I would like to show you a small video. It's just 80 seconds, I think, of a Dutch sales director in Kinshasa. Let me look for that. And you see how he does his meetings.
Met het maandelijks overleg met zijn sales managers.
So, yes! Yes, yes, yes!
Dit zijn van die dingen die je in de westerse culturen niet meemaakt. En wat hier helemaal in die Afrikaanse cultuur ingebed zit. En dat is fantastisch om daar onderdeel van te mogen uitmaken. Ik krijg er na 3 jaar nog steeds kippenvel van. Ça veut dire dans, littéralement, 12 mois, dans une année, on a gagné pas 1%, pas 2, pas 3, pas 4, pas 5, pas 6, pas 7, pas 8, pas 9, pas 10, pas 11, pas 12, pas 13, pas 14, 15%! Het verschil tussen zo'n salesmeeting hier of in Nederland, op een bepaalde manier is het hetzelfde. Het gaat over, jongens, wat hebben we gedaan, waar staan we en waar gaan we naartoe. Dus een van de dingen die heel erg motiveert en die, wat de basismotivatie is achter alles wat we doen, is proberen om de marktleider te zijn. Dat is commercieel goed, maar dat is gewoon ook heel erg belangrijk voor de status en het respect dat onze mannen thuis krijgen, onder vrienden krijgen.
Even for the people that don't speak Dutch or French, it was quite understandable, I hope, right? So that is about the way of working. Heineken cares. That's the essential thinking, and it does so by setting itself objectives, such as the following. 70% of the management needs to be local by 2020. Local sourcing, so don't buy your ingredients from elsewhere, but make sure your supply chain is all local. 60% by 2020 is the objective. And this agricultural part has to be done in a sustainable way. So clearly training farmers on how they can grow the ingredients and making sure that they are having that there's a trust basis, that they will know that they will sell these ingredients and doing so in a sustainable way for the earth. And all this is being measured by economic impact studies, right? So we actually want to show what is the impact of the company on economic perspective, but also on environmental and on social aspects, and to be transparent about this impact. And as you can see, these are really direct business aspects, but even the more indirect, such as healthcare, are very important. And one of the programs that Heineken is doing in Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is on HIV/AIDS. So Heineken has a program and a policy to help people with HIV/AIDS and to help prevent it. And lastly, there's a community fund that I wanted to mention, which is a philanthropic fund. And the reason I'm sharing those last two is the following, because I would like to give two examples actually of where stakeholder management can be really challenging. Because when a company interacts with society, well, this comes clearly with challenges that you don't expect, you don't learn in your MBA necessarily or in your university, but you have to deal with them. And the first one has to do with indeed that HIV/AIDS program, because everybody was very proud of that program. And we actually won an award, and here you see Charlene de Carvalho, which is the daughter of Mr. Heineken, who is receiving the Business Leadership Award in New York at the Global Business Coalition on Health. So whilst Heineken is a front runner on this topic in sub-Saharan Africa, it also triggered an activist campaign for something Heineken was doing in Cambodia, or actually was not doing in Cambodia. And this was a campaigner that said, well, listen, Heineken, you are doing so well in Africa, but what about the women that are promoting your beer in Cambodia, which was a small group of 200 women. And they wrote a letter in this Lancet, which is one of the most reputable medical journals. And it said, Heineken reports providing therapy to its workers in Africa. However, we note its failure to provide similar treatment in Cambodia, specifically to its women beer sellers. The workplace risks from alcohol overuse, violence, forced sex, and HIV/AIDS for sellers of Heineken are alarming. So when you receive that type of information, it is suddenly like all that you have been trying to do in Africa is broken down by such news. And it was clear to us that what was good in Africa was a challenge in Asia. So we were proud on the work we did, but in Africa we had a long history, as you have seen. Whilst in Asia we were working with a joint venture partner. There was no management control, but also not the same culture, the Heineken culture and the way of working that we try to share with our operating companies around the world. And it was clear that even though we had a beautiful policy on CSR, and whether it's on HIV/AIDS or it's on health and safety or on the environment, a policy is one, but the local adaptation is clearly key. And we improved the situation, luckily, but it took a while, it took a long time, by slowly building also these relationships in Asia, by really having this two-way learning and understanding. And it's only then that you can say, well, now we can start integrating our ways of working. And the last point we learned, very, very important, we may show that we are vulnerable and that we are actually a learning organization. So let's at least communicate, let's be transparent about it. And once you are transparent and open to the outside world, you suddenly receive a lot of, well, criticism clearly, but also a lot of good ideas on how you can improve, and people that want to help and organizations that want to support you. So a second example of this challenge is the Heineken Africa Foundation. And this is the foundation that is clearly more focused on the philanthropy work. It was a foundation with funding coming from the headquarters, local breweries, factories, working together with NGOs, partnering to create community healthcare. So there was a program for teachers against sexual abuse in the DRC. There was a program against malaria in Nigeria. A program on mobile clinic infrastructures in remote areas in Namibia and in South Africa. But there again, we had this other difficulty because we said the projects must have an impact, a positive social impact on the communities where these projects are running. Because if you build a clinic and that's it, clearly that's not the way to go. And maybe in the past that was celebrated, but nowadays, especially in the Netherlands, there's a large criticism on this type of philanthropy. So we said, no, we want to do it well. So we said we have to measure everything. But first of all, we said, well, what is then an effective positive impact? How do you define that? And what to measure and for how long? So we set up this system, you know, looking at inputs. For example, how many money do I put into the clinic? Then the output, the clinic has been built. Then the outcome, actually people come for testing for HIV/AIDS or for malaria or whatever. And then in the end you could look at, well, what is then the final impact on mortality or on disease? Yeah, this was a nice structure. We thought about it a lot clearly, and we set up this quarterly reporting, and then we went talking to our partners locally and say, listen, we have to do this. But it wasn't that easy, because what was appropriate in Europe was a challenge in Africa. Clearly, because the partners we worked with were very local organizations. They often had a poor level of education. They were not really interested in the figures, but more in the nice stories of somebody that got cured, or, which is also important, but for us that wasn't strong enough. They were not used to measuring, and it was very time and money consuming. So again there, what did we do? Bit by bit building these relationships, and we changed our model in a more simplified way of quarterly reporting. We kept the quarterly reporting as a tool, but we simplified it, and we said, well, listen, what do you then want to know, and how to get this storytelling in, and how, so integration of these ways of working, and again, communication and transparency. So what I guess and this is more now back to the overall thinking of what do these case studies learn for us? We clearly shifted from the shareholder model, which you see here, the little bird feeding his shareholders, not seeing that the branch is breaking down, to a stakeholder model, where the company is in the center and where we think, well, who are our stakeholders? Who has the most legitimacy? Who is the most urgent in its stake? Well, we try to find out how to organize that. But now, more and more, and luckily I see a lot of companies going into the direction of the right circle, and the right circle is actually one that is rolling. It is where local development is placed in the center. And the company is one of the stakeholders. And once the company starts to regard itself as being one of the stakeholders rather than in the center, you see that the development starts. And that's development not only for the society, but clearly also the development for the company. And then I like this analogy very much. It's by Darlene Bailey and Rose Bader. It's about the eggplants and the earthworms. It says actually the following. It says the eggplant, and of course you can relate to your company, they take all the goodness out of the soil and put nothing of value back. Each eggplant operates alone with only its own interests at heart and is dependent on the soil for sustenance. Whilst the earthworms take what they need from the soil, they put back in the form of rich humus. And thus they leave the soil better than they found it. And in doing so, they cooperate with one another and work together. And now, of course, the critical question comes, where would you position your organization? But I guess it is something that all companies have to look at. So in the end, it is the survival of the most fitting, not the survival of the fittest, the survival of the most fitting. And I think the questions to take away, and then I'll hand over, are really to look at your own company and think, am I integrating the best of both worlds in my overseas business? Is my supply chain as local as can be? Because the more local, the more impact, both positive and negative, so that comes next. Am I taking a societal approach or a company approach? And lastly, do I know the full impact of my product or service along its entire value chain? So, thank you very much. This presentation is really a reflection of both the business work as well as the academic reflection. And I guess it's all about strategic CSR. It's all about knowing your your value chain of your company, whether it's a product or a service, that doesn't matter. And development can come through value creation. So thank you very much, and I think now the floor is open. I hope we have some time for questions, or...
Yes, indeed.
Yes?
Anyone having a question for Katinka?
You say that the local managers are partly responsible for the implementation of CSR. Do they also feel that in their paycheck? Are they evaluated with the success of those programs, or is it just more general kind of evaluation?
I would like it to be way more important in their evaluation and in their remuneration, but it is included. So it's included. It's not the biggest part, but it is included. And I think that does help. So you see, and then maybe I'm not speaking so much from my Heineken experience, but from another company where if every manager, for every plan he has to write, whether it's a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a project plan, if he has to put in some considerations of what is my social and what is my environmental positive impact and negative impact, what do I foresee, then automatically managers start to think about, hey, I have to write something there. So even the least interested manager would become aware of what he could actually do to influence something positively. So it's not only about the end remuneration, where I think it definitely helps to put in some key performance indicators, but it's also at the start of creating the plans. Yeah.
More questions?
Thanks for your talk. I was just curious if the local people, are they as enthusiastic about what you're planning to do as Heineken?
Well, the whole thinking is that should be the case. So we would not do anything, for example, with this foundation that is not locally driven. And what you see is the local brewery already has some knowledge about the local situation, clearly. So they are able to judge the proposals of the NGOs that come in and to see whether or not those are relevant, whether those NGOs are reputable NGOs. So they do very much work together with the local NGOs. And of course, you can always ask yourself, well, are those local NGOs now submitting a proposal because your criteria are X, Y, Z and they want to follow your criteria to get funding? Yes, that's always something we realize. So what we try to do is find not only references, but also find how local proposals fit in the national development plan. If the national healthcare plan is not at all addressing the issue, then probably we would not go around funding it.
Thank you very much for your opinion.